Heck. Rodriguez. Waters. Mayor, you have a quorum.
All right, let's say the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, let's go ahead and do we have any motions to direct the city manager to add any agenda items? I know there's one thing that Harold and I were going to talk about, and that is on Friday. It looks like we're going to have a discussion about opportunity zones, and it should be a brief presentation, and then we'll have a discussion.
Correct. And that's driven by timing based on some questions we've had from folks interested in different projects.
And the other reason is on the 23rd, I pulled it from the agenda because it's inclusionary zoning, and it's our work plan discussion. So I didn't want to go all till all hours of the night. So, all right. Public invited to be heard. Let's go ahead. You've got 3 minutes. When the light goes off, I'm going to cut you. I'll cut you off. Go ahead. Right. Then Mayor Pro Tem actually brought something up. Who else will not be here on Friday for CML? Anyone else going to CML?
Just her.
No? Oh, just her? Okay.
For
All right.
those not here, we will actually have individual briefings on it.
Okay, all right. I just want to make sure Mayor Pro Tem is caught up. All right, so you have 3 minutes. Light goes on. I'm going to cut you off. Be nice. All right, and let's go ahead and start with Ralph Patrick. And really what I mean is be respectful. You don't have to be nice.
I'm here with the Alzheimer's Association. I work as the regional director. As you know, Alzheimer's disease is one of the leading scourges of our day. It's the 6th leading cause of death. Some have said that if we don't find a cure or some kind of an effective treatment for this disease, it's going to bankrupt our system as we know it. The Alzheimer's Association is the 3rd largest funder of research in the world. We provide numerous programs and support services for those who are living with the disease, which happens to be about 70,000 Coloradoans, as well as their caregivers and families. We provide here in this area support groups, early stage programming, educational classes, and various other services for the community, such as individual care consultations, and we do it for free. The reason we're able to do this is because of people like Brandy Queen and Michelle Waite and the Longmont Senior Center who host these classes and these services. In fact, Brandy Queen is here. She's going to speak. She's one of our support group facilitators. On November 8th, we're hosting a community forum at the Longmont Senior Center. It's at 10 o'clock a.m. We'd like to invite the council, any other leaders in the community to come to that, to ask questions, to receive information, and to show their support for the Alzheimer's Association and your concern for the catastrophic effect that this disease is having on our nation and our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Phil Willis?
I wanted to speak on 5B. Will there be a time at that time to speak?
I think it needs to be now. I mean, it doesn't have to be now, but there will not be a time later. Now's the time.
Mayor Bagley, council members, I'm Phil Willis, 12244 Weld County Road 1, Longmont. And my wife and I own a farm out on County Line Road that's part of this discussion of an enclave tonight. It's been a family farm since 1950. We've been 5 generations here in Longmont. Our children and our grandchildren all live on the farm now with us. And we've been there and farmed all our lives. And we were rather surprised to see that Longmont's talking about taking us in and annexing us as an enclave. One might say, well, that would be valuable for you. Well, it really isn't valuable for us because some of you may or may not have heard of West Union Development some 10 or 15 years ago. We were part of that. And we had plans to develop our farm, and it would be our for our golden years and take care of our children and grandchildren. That didn't happen for various reasons, but irregardless, we don't feel like we should be forced to annex into the city. We think that that is against our rights. Back in 1950, there was 8,099 people here. Now there's almost 100,000, 93 some. And Longmont didn't go past Martin Street in those days. And we have a long history. We've always supported Longmont. We've been tried to be good neighbors with them. Our property goes up to Union Reservoir. We were in discussions with Longmont a year ago about perhaps working something out with part of our farm becoming the expansion of Union Reservoir. Didn't happen for whatever reason, but our neighbors and I live in the country. We like living there. We have animals. We have hunting. We have mineral rights. We have water rights, and we don't want to lose any of those things. And I think if we are annexed into Longmont, we probably will lose, if not all of them, a good share of them. So we would encourage you to, if you pursue the annexation, please do it on a case-by-case basis with the property owners, and don't force them to do something they don't want to do. It's always contentious when that happens. People want to fight and argue, and it just isn't good neighbors. So we would encourage you to be a good neighbor with us. And if you want to annex, talk to us, and if there's a benefit, fine. If there's not a benefit, we don't think we should have to annex. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Brandy Queen.
Hello. Is this working? Okay. I'm Brandy Queen. I am the Seniors Counselor and Resource Education Coordinator at our Senior Center here in Longmont. And I came with Ralph Patrick today to talk a little bit about some of the services and changes in services that we're looking at for folks who are living with dementia and their family members. Because our aging population is booming, so is the incidence of dementia in our community, and we want to be prepared to support people. So in addition to the classes and programs and support groups that Ralph has mentioned, in the last year and a half or so, we started making a calendar that we call the dementia-friendly calendar of community events with private sector businesses, city businesses, different organizations to just have more things for people with dementia and their family caregivers to be able to go out and do and know that it's an okay place to just live with dementia and be out in public and still be engaged and have a safe space to socialize. We do have flyers with this calendar on the table outside the door. We also have flyers there for Ralph's event that he mentioned on November 8th. It's at the Senior Center. The other expansion we've really looked at, and this is in conjunction with Dementia Friendly Boulder County, which is an initiative started through the Area Agency on Aging, so it's county-wide, is looking at how our businesses around the county can be more dementia friendly. So we're looking at how do folks know if they're working with someone who has dementia, what are the signs, what kind of behaviors might you expect, and how do you respond appropriately? So for the last 10 months, we've been doing this for City of Longmont employees as part of the CLU, City of Longmont University. And we are now expanding that so that every other month we can offer those not just as CLU classes, but as classes that are open to anyone in the community. Council, private businesses, public businesses, government. If anyone is interested in getting a free 1 hour or less training on how they can better serve folks who are living with dementia, we are happy to be a point of contact for that. And we have flyers outside the door. Thank you.
Thank you. Jessica Goldberg. Okay. Dave Wergen.
Good evening. My name's Dave Wergen. I live at 1623 Stones Peak Drive in Longmont. We're, oops, is that off? It's on, just got to get closer. 1623 Stones Peak. We've been residents in Longmont for over 41 years, and I'm on the Golf Advisory Board, just full disclosure, but I'm here as a private citizen to talk just briefly about item 3C, actually items 3A, B, and C, the extension of the sales tax, the continuation, to fund some improvements that are necessary. I'd like to point out that the golf courses are, while there are fees, we are competitive with other municipal golf courses, which are subsidized for their infrastructure and replacement of sprinkler systems and some of the expensive maintenance items in the golf courses. But the golf course isn't the only one that's going to benefit from 3C. The rec centers, pools, I don't know about softball fields, baseball fields, tennis courts, soccer fields. There's a number of things that eventually will need some improvements. So I just wanted to encourage council and the citizens to vote yes on item 3C. The ballots came out today. There was a Boulder County ballot or issue item, booklet that went out, and it didn't have anything in support of 3C. There was apparently didn't receive a comment in a timely fashion, so that was a little disappointing. But the booklet that the city sent out does have recommendations in support of 3C. So thank you for your time, and I hope all the C passes, A, B, and C. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Oregon. Michael Baca.
My name is Michael Baca from 1400 Brookfield Drive, Longmont, Colorado. I'd like to thank Mayor Begley, the City Council, and all of the citizens of this community for coming out this evening. I originally planned to come and discuss some comments made by Polly Christensen against individual liberty. However, I was listening to a podcast off the Longmont Observer today with Mayor Begley, and I decided to address that instead. Mayor Begley, as an individual, you seem to be a pretty good-spirited person. However, when your politics and manner of handling them arise, that is a completely different matter in my mind. You have entrusted yourself with the goal of holding the City Council together and seem to aim to remain politically neutral when it comes to the inalienable right to keep and bear arms due to the controversy around this issue. To me, this is as bad as putting a nail in the coffin of the Second Amendment. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. And Mayor, I hope I can count you as a good man. The right to keep and bear arms is one of the pillars of our society was built upon. It is something, as a public official, you are tasked with protecting. It is something that allows we, the people, to defend ourselves from all manners of threats. Data provided by the FBI indicates that 1 out of every 318 people will be a victim of violent crime in the city. The right to self-defense enables the elderly, women, and all matters of civilians to effectively level the playing field and even tilt the scales on their side when it comes to violent crime. The right to keep and bear arms, although not a threat at this point, enables us to defend ourselves against foreign threats. There is a quote from Yamamoto, a Japanese general during World War II. Although disputed at times, the message remains the same. You cannot invade the mainland United States. There would be a gun behind every blade of grass. Finally, we are at a point where our nation's history where mistrust of the government is at a very high point. Although I am sure we all wish that this does not happen, the right to maintain munitions enables us to defend ourselves against an oppressive and tyrannical government. In short, the Second Amendment guarantees us, the people, access to the tools to maintain our safety, freedom, and well-being. Mayor Begley, we need you to step into the ring. We need you to defend freedom and individual liberty. We need you to honor the countless lives that were lost and mutilated in defense of our rights. We need you to honor your oath. Liberty is being assaulted across the nation, and as my political representative, I am calling upon you to uphold your duty. Please, do not let all the sacrifices of past and present generations mean nothing. I implore you, stand on the side of justice and individual liberty. Stand on the side of what is good, righteous, and just. We the people need you to take up arms, so to say. Thank you for your time, and Mayor Begley, I truly hope that you take into consideration what I've said this evening. Thank you, sir.
All right, Robert Studebaker.
Robert Studebaker, 1200 Carbide Court. I'd like to thank the mayor and council members. All right, thank you. Council members this evening for listening to me. April 18th, 1775, a few men rode out in the middle of the night to warn people in this country that a force was coming, a force to force them to purchase goods they didn't want to pay for, to remove the leadership which we entrusted upon, and to remove our right to defend ourselves. These men were British soldiers, and they showed up on our shores, and this man was Paul Revere. He rode all night with a few other men to warn the resistance and the rebellion in this country, the very early days. And what the British had come for was our leadership, people like Samuel Adams and John Hancock. Most importantly, they found out that we were stockpiling firearms, munitions. They came to take them. So at Lexington, Massachusetts, and at Concord, we held a battle. They came to take our guns and told us to put them down. We said no. So our leaders of the rebellion said, put down your guns. But someone fired a shot. Shot heard around the world. Started the American Revolution in the country that we live in today. The founding principles of our nation was individual liberty and the right to defend ourselves from a tyrannical government. People we didn't believe that were our representatives overseas. People who didn't understand our causes and what we fought for, who we wanted to trade with. These people were forcing us into a lifestyle we didn't want. And because we had firearms, we were allowed to say no. It's very hard for a government to tell people what to do when they don't want to do it if they're armed. It's very important to freedom and liberty is the right to say no. If you can't defend yourself from a tyrannical government, you can't say no. And throughout time and history, we have seen when the people lose the ability to say no to governments, governments walk all over them, put them in camps, exterminate them. And I don't want to see that happen here. I believe in freedom. I believe in this country and what it stood for, what it was founded upon, is that each person was responsible for maintaining the freedom of this country, by maintaining the freedom of themselves, looking out for each other, helping each other. That's why we're here. The United States is a different country. It's different from the rest of the world. We have a lot of problems. But one thing that makes this country great is every single one of us values freedom and the ability to say no to things we don't like, the ability to say yes, and to work with each other, to talk with each other. And I feel that open dialogue is the most important thing that we can have. So instead of violence and jumping at each other's throats, thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, Leslie Hollywood.
Good evening. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. My name is Leslie Hollywood. I come here tonight as a concerned citizen. You see, my family has deep roots in Longmont. I have always thought the city to be a safe place to live and to work. But after I read comments made by Mayor Pro Tem Polly Christensen to John Baer of the Daily Camera this past Saturday, I worry I am actually completely wrong. And I wonder if I should, in fact, be doing a better job watching out for my family. Not only do I have daughters of my own, I have nieces who live in this town. I have a 19-year-old niece who lives alone. She lost her mom, my sister, to suicide right here in this town almost 4 years ago. Her father is uninvolved in her life. I am her lifeline. My niece has Asperger's syndrome. She is a beautiful young woman who faces personal struggles of her own. She does not drive. She takes public transportation or Uber to and from work, as well as regular Ubers to doctor's appointments, shopping, and various other personal outings. She also walks long distances on a regular basis, as I cannot always be available to give her rides. I have already worried she may fall victim to someone who sees her vulnerabilities. But now I find out that our own Mayor Pro Tem, Polly Christensen, has, and I quote, had people try to kill her and people try to rape her. When I first read this in the Daily Camera, I thought, goodness, she must be from a really big city full of crime like Chicago. But then I learned a little bit more about the Mayor Pro Tem, and I discovered that she's actually been in Longmont for nearly 30 years. I would like to know what has been done about these very serious attempted assaults. Are the perpetrators still wandering the streets? Are they behind bars? Do I need to worry even more than I already have that my niece is going to be raped in this town if I continue to let her use public transportation or live alone? Or worse yet, murdered? What can the city council do to put my mind and the citizens' mind at ease after being informed of such disturbing information we previously did not know? I thought Longmont was much safer than this. Is it safe for my family to continue to live in this city? I hope you will answer my questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I think you didn't give your address?
1840 Meadow Drive,
What city?
Longmont.
Okay, thank you. Mary Rose Gutierrez.
Good evening, Mayor Bagley and council members. My name is Mary Rose Gutierrez. I live at 750 Fordham Street, Longmont. I'm here tonight to talk to you about the use tax applied to tangible personal property. The state's new title and registration system called Drives is currently configured to charge Longmont use sales tax on used mobile homes. I am urgently requesting that you reconfigure the system to exempt the tax applied to used mobile homes, as it is going to severely impact impending transactions with private parties, lenders, and retailers, even your clerks at the DMV, because they'll be confronted by people that have been blindsided. Many mobile home sales are purchased by working class people, as mobile homes are probably the last affordable housing for its citizens in Colorado. When you add a 3.53% used sales tax to the sale of used mobile homes, it could possibly prevent a buyer from moving into their home after they have closed on it, because when they go to title it, they will be hit with the sales tax that they weren't informed about. If they can't afford to record their titles, then that means they won't be able to sign the lease with the community they have purchased the home in, because they don't have proof of title transfer. They also won't be able to insure their home, because they purchased because they can't record their name on the title to show proof of ownership. Just to give you an idea, if a buyer buys a mobile home for $30,000, they are going to have to pay $1,050 in use tax, when all they were expecting to pay was $30.20 to record the title. If a buyer buys a home for $60,000, they'll have to pay $2,118 to record the title. Buyers can barely come up with a down payment, let alone an additional $1,000 to $3,000 in sales tax. For the public and city, what does each separate city code say about new and used city tax on tangible personal property? Since the implementation of the new software program called Drive, which is being used throughout the state, where they have been in fact exempting for a long time. Now all of these home ruled cities have been applying this use tax on used mobile homes. Why the sudden change on the city sales tax? Right or wrong, you have not been collecting use tax on used mobile homes for the past 30 years. Is there a reading of your city code? Somewhere, someone along the road read these codes and decided to exempt them. In all fairness to your Longmont citizens and mobile home buyers, I implore you to continue to exempt the city, the used sales tax on used mobile homes, as you have done in the years past. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Rick Visser.
My name is Rick Visser. I live at 920 11th Avenue, Longmont. And I just want to take a moment to remind us all that today is World Food Day, F-O-O-D. Now, we probably didn't know that when you came to this chamber tonight, and probably no one in this room knew that. Today is World Food Day. Tonight, 800 million people on this precious blue planet are going to bed hungry. 100 million people lack clean drinking water. 6 million children will die this year from preventable diseases, sometimes easily preventable diseases. This is equivalent to 40 fully laden Boeing 747s crashing every day. If a single 747 crashed today, it would be all over the nightly news. Scenes of rescuers looking through the wreckage and doctors treating any survivors would fill our living rooms, and we would watch these scenes over and over again, and it would rightly be seen as a moral emergency. As we study and discuss the very important issues in tonight's agenda, 12 million people are near starvation in Yemen. It is estimated to be the largest famine in 100 years. Did we know that? There is enough food to feed everyone on the planet. Everyone knows that. And there is enough wealth and resources in Longmont to eliminate hunger and homelessness in this city forever. Everyone knows that. If it were in our hearts, we could feed them, clothe them, house them, and help heal the infirmities that plague their bodies, minds, and hearts. Today is World Food Day. Let us bring it home to this chamber tonight. Let us take a moment to contemplate our priorities and commitments in light of these realities. I tried to express these thoughts in a short poem I wrote last February. It's called Drag Me Back Home Again. Perhaps it's too easy to write poems of love, dragonflies' wings, smell of fresh apples, principalities, powers, delicate morning light, impressions of sound and scent, hail, bamboo, the round-leafed violet, my special experience.
I would love to hear the rest of it, but unfortunately, if we let you go, then everyone's going to have to go. But I thank you. Could you actually leave a copy with the? Could you actually leave the copy with the clerk?
Sure.
Thank you. Jeff Thompson.
Jeff Thompson, 1616 Sumner Street. Mayor Baum, several things I don't know I'll have time for, but first of all, at the Platte River Power Authority's directors meeting on September 27th last month, the proposed budget for 2019 was presented, and in that proposed budget, Platte River is proposing to continue to spend money on the Windy Gap firming project. And as the proposed budget explains, those costs are related solely to generating power with coal. Longmont has passed a resolution that we're going to get 100% off fossil fuels, 100% off coal. So that eliminates the need for the Windy Gap firming project as far as Platte River is concerned. And Fort Collins just a couple weeks ago passed basically the same resolution, 100% off fossil fuel. So Platte River, if we don't stop this at Platte River, they're going to spend probably $75 million more dollars on a project that's not absolutely, not in any way needed, when that money could be used to offset the very high cost of this transition to renewable sources of generation. So Could you tell us tonight whether it's been decided how Longmont's two directors, and you're one of them, are going to vote on that? And if you're not absolutely sure that you're going to vote to take that out of the budget for Platte River, could you have a hearing, a separate hearing, not a chance to speak at public, invited to be heard next week, because there's other important things that people need to say at that, but a separate hearing so the public can express their views, basically confer with you as to how Longmont's two votes should get. It would seem to me that it would be very hypocritical. It would basically make our 100% renewable resolution look like a political stunt and nothing more if we proceed to spend probably, this is an estimate, but probably 75 million more on a project that is solely justified by producing electricity with coal.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thompson. And just quickly, I will address that during council comments at the end. All right, that concludes our public invited to be heard. And I would encourage everybody to stick around to the end so I don't have to say anything now and break the quorum. I invite you to stay. All right, let's go ahead and let's see here. Do we have any special reports? Nope, nothing? All right, let's go ahead and move on to a proclamation designating October 2018 as Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month in Colorado. So I'm going to go ahead and read it, and then I'm going to invite you to say a few words if you don't mind.
Thank you.
All right, so welcome back. I believe this is what? What number is this for you now?
It's been 7 years,
7 years?
2011.
Okay. So whereas on October 25th, 1988, President Ronald Reagan designated October as Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month, and whereas approximately 1 in every 4 women suffers a miscarriage, stillbirth, or infant loss, and whereas Longmont community organizations and advocates throughout the city work diligently to support women and families who have faced a significant loss through miscarriage, stillbirth, or infant loss, and whereas recognizing October as Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month will provide bereaved mothers, fathers, and family members with acknowledgement of and compassion for the great tragedy that has impacted their lives, and whereas bringing public awareness to this grief will help those who feel marginalized in their loss to see a compassionate society that can recognize their suffering and grief. Now, therefore, I, Brian J. Bagley, Mayor, by virtue of the authority vested in me and the City Council of the City of Longmont, do hereby proclaim October 2018 as Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month in Longmont, and I invite all citizens in the community to support those who have been affected by pregnancy and infant loss.
Thank you.
No, thank you. So why don't you go ahead and say a few words, and we'll snap a photo.
Okay. Maybe a little more than a few words. Good evening, Mayor Bigley, members of council, and listening audience. My name is Marika Barris, and I was the founding executive director of My Baby Angel Foundation, a local nonprofit started in 2010. My volunteer work for over 6 years was to provide free consultations to those suffering a pregnancy or infant loss. During this time, I was honored to support hundreds of courageous women, men, families locally and across our nation. Unfortunately, due to an accident, I was unable to continue at this level of work, and My Baby Angel Foundation was dissolved. I was initiated into this experience of loss through the death of 2 of my grandchildren in 2008 and 2009. They were born too early to survive. My passion to help transform society's response to pregnancy and infant loss continues. As we mentioned, our first proclamation was in 2011. One of the purposes of a proclamation is that it is of interest or benefit to increase the public awareness for the majority of our citizens. We increase awareness so that we can question our perceptions, values, prejudices, societal norms, and our fears. I look back 60 years ago when I was a young child and my friend's mother was diagnosed with cancer. I remember my mother taking me aside and whispering to me that I could not go over to my friend's home any longer because her mother had cancer. We knew so little about this disease in those days. Ignorance isolated that woman and her family. Day after day, the curtains were drawn in the house. I never went there to play again, and I heard one day that she had died. We were all afraid that we might get the cancer. Ignorance and fear can isolate us from those in our society that need acknowledgement, support, transparency, and compassion. Who of us here in this room has not experienced a loss of some form? Our society sends a message of either acceptance or rejection based on transparency, funding, policies, benefits, and a willingness to openly talk and grieve. Women and men facing cancer today experience an army of support as they face their diagnosis and treatment. It doesn't only come from the medical world. It comes from our society that has transformed fear, the fear that I talked about, into love. It's a world that wants an answer as to why and a cure to eliminate the suffering. Pregnancy and infant loss is still in a transformative process. As one baby loss mother who suffered multiple miscarriages in our community stated, "Why is this experience often centered around silence? A silence that is so suffocating and so lonely that it prolongs the pain that many think you should have gotten over the loss by now. Why is it such a taboo topic? Without compassionate understanding, many are embarrassed and feel broken, ashamed of their bodies failing them, and questioning what they did wrong. The more we talk and share, the more we lighten the load of grief and confusion that someone is carrying." Another mother whose 3.5-month-old baby died suddenly of SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome, suggested that businesses review and implement policies that are compassionate to bereaved parents whose sudden and unexpected loss of a child destroys their dreams and plans for their family. That they have paid time off and a vacation pool should be available to those who face such heartbreak. We need more education on the psychological and physiological effects of grief and not expect someone to grieve for a week and move on. And our norm should be that we're able to remember and acknowledge our children publicly that are both living and deceased. Our city proclamation helps to bring public awareness to this disenfranchised grief. It will be our voices that implement the changes we are seeking in our medical world, religious communities, places of employment, and institutions of education. As these environments change, our society's perception changes, and we find ourselves arriving in a more compassionate world where love is stronger than fear. Today, I invite the listeners to be a change agent in your world. Acceptance is not an option if we are to move forward as a united world, honoring our differences, life experiences, and losses. Now's the time to open our hearts to compassionate action on behalf of ourselves and others. This is how we can turn the tide of declining mental health and violence in our world. Thank you for this proclamation and your time this evening.
All right, thank you. Can we get a picture, please, while we give you the proclamation? Come on, council. All right, next is a proclamation designating October 2018 as Conflict Resolution Month in Longmont, Colorado. We were going to do it last week, but... And did I just, ma'am, before you leave, wait. Did I accidentally hand you my agenda? Just the proclamation? You sure? You sure? It's all good. That's all right. Thank you. It's all good. I'll wing it. I've been doing this since 2011. I should know what to do now, right? All right. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming. Whereas conflict resolution encompasses mediation, arbitration, facilitation, collaborative decision-making, restorative processes, and other responses to differences. And whereas the conflict resolution process empowers individuals, families, communities, organizations, and businesses to foster communication and devise solutions that are acceptable to the needs and interests of all parties involved. And whereas conflict resolution is taught and practiced by citizens in many school systems, universities, and graduate programs throughout Colorado and the world as a way to solving disputes. And whereas community-based programs fairly and equitably resolve neighborhood and community conflicts, thereby strengthening local relationships. And now, therefore, I, Brian J. Bagley, Mayor, by virtue of the authority vested in me and the City Council of the City of Longmont, do hereby proclaim October 2018 as Conflict Resolution Month in Longmont and encourage all residents to engage in collaborative and constructive means of conflict resolution. So, do you have something to say in addition to coming up and receiving the proclamation? Nice to see you again.
Hello, Mayor Bagley, Mayor Pro Tem Christensen, City Council. It's great to be here. I feel that the Conflict Resolution Month in Colorado proclamation in Longmont is an important statement, both of the need in our community for conflict resolution practices in these times where public discourse is often very challenged as people are polarized and separated from each other, and also a recognition of important work going on in our city, and to thank you for the support of the work for conflict resolution that is already taking place. So I'm going to yield time to my companions to say a few words both about Conflict Resolution Month and also about some of the work going on in Longmont.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Jessica Goldberg. I'm the Volunteer and Training Coordinator at Longmont Community Justice Partnership, a nonprofit in Longmont that provides restorative justice services and training. And I want to express gratitude to the leaders of our city for funding not just restorative justice in the city, but also mediation services. I think Longmont is looked to across this nation as a model city for implementing restorative processes and making those available in partnership with police. So thank you for making that possible.
Good evening, and thank you for having us. I'm Mary Zinn of Denver, Colorado, and we have a statewide effort, and now Longmont, thank you very much, is joining that effort and making a statement that says, yes, we believe conflict resolution and solving problems nonviolently is important, and we're going to pay attention to this in our community. Every year, the statewide outreach group selects a book, and we want to make this book, the 10th one we've selected, available to all of you. This is our gift to you. It is Why Won't You Apologize by Harriet Lerner. And it has some good messages about apologies that work and apologies that do not work for various reasons.
Yeah, Bonnie.
Yes,
kidding.
read it with your best friends. Read it with someone that you care about so you have the same understanding. And I appreciate so much other citizens this evening who talked about nonviolence and working things out. You'll notice on our yard signs, our tagline is listen first, talk, work it out. And that's what you do here in Longmont at every session. You listen, talk, and work it out. We're grateful to be partnering with you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the group want to say a few words? All right, great. Can we get our picture?
Yes, of course, we forgot to say something. We would encourage your listeners and everyone in the community to go to conflictresolutionmonth.org to see the various activities that take place during October in Colorado, all across the state.
You want to say it one more time?
conflictresolutionmonth.org.
All right. All right, let's go ahead and move on to study session items. Everybody doing okay? It's only been about 45, 50 minutes. We doing all right? All right, and for the record, I love Bonnie. You're awesome. There was no apology necessary. All right. All right. Study session items. Let's move on to duplex water accounts.
Good evening, Mayor Bagley and members of council. I'm Becky Doyle, Public Works and Natural Resources Rate Analyst, and I'm here responding to a previous direction from council to come back with some information about how duplexes are charged for water and how we might address some issues with equity in that. So, to begin with, currently duplexes are charged the same rate as single-family homes for their water use. Now, why is that? That is because when duplexes become part of the system, they pay the same system development fees that single-family homes pay. And what that does, when you pay a development fee, you're establishing the capacity that's required to serve that unit. And so when we establish system development fees, and accordingly the rates that are associated with those fees, we looked at single-family homes and duplexes as a single unit. So development fees are one part of how we finance the water utility. All the other, most costs are covered though in the rates. So those are established via a cost of service analysis. So we look at ongoing costs, we divide those out by the different rate classes and figure out how much it costs us to provide water service in each of those rate classes. So when we do that, we're looking at a couple of things. One is something called interclass equity, so that each rate class is only paying for the cost of serving that class. So commercial users aren't paying for the cost of irrigation users and vice versa. We're also looking at intra-class equity. So each member of that rate class pays for the water that they use. And if there's higher cost types of use, you're paying more for that higher cost type of use. So all of that to say, this is what our current single-family water rates are. So there's a monthly service charge that's based on the size of the meter that's installed at the facility. In 99% of single-family homes and also duplexes, that's this 5/8 by 3/4 inch size, so $6 a month. In addition to that monthly service charge, there's a volume charge based on how much water is used. And this, for single-family water, that is based on an increasing block structure. So as you use more, that irrigation, that higher use is more expensive because we have to have the capacity to serve that. So that's a higher cost. So the question has come up because duplexes hit into those higher tiers potentially sooner because of there are the two residential units that are attached in that single water meter. So we did not previously have data about how duplex use was different from single family use because we looked at it as single rate class. However, our GIS team was able to work with planning and pull apart single unit versus duplex water use. So this is a comparison of daily water use. It's in January and February, so winter. This is solely indoor use, most likely. And you can see that consistently over a period of 7 years, the duplex use is about twice as high as the single family use. So there's a statistically significant difference between what water is used in a duplex versus a single family home. However, when we look at July and August, which are our peak irrigation months, the use is about 25% higher in a duplex than a single family home. And that difference is not statistically significant. So the indoor use definitely varies, but the outdoor use looks pretty similar. So what do we do with that information? Well, we have a few options, and we can talk through some of these. We could continue to treat duplexes as single family, which is status quo. We could change to classifying them as multifamily, which has some implications. We could require separate metering so that each unit would, hit those tiers based on their individual use. Or we could establish a new class when we do our 2019 rate and fee study. We do believe that there are sufficient numbers to establish that rate class as a statistically significant group on its own.
Councilmember Peck?
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. So this has brought up several little questions.
Well, hold on one second. And then how many slides do we have left?
That is the last slide.
Okay, perfect. I was thinking so, but just for a second, I was like, no, go ahead. Sorry.
So if this duplex, two separate families, if they're sold as two separate units, but there's only one meter, how do you figure out what each family pays?
So, Mayor Bagley, Councilmember Peck, that is currently the situation that many duplex residents find themselves in. There is one meter for both units, and they have to establish amongst themselves a method for dividing up the bill. So the city is not concerned with how that works. There are some consumer level sub-meters that are available, digital things that you can use, which are not as accurate as the turbine meters that the city would use to charge you for water, but might give you an idea of which unit is using how much. So that's one method. And property managers
I
are
think
free.
that's where a conflict resolution would really come in handy. And it doesn't seem quite fair to me. And of course, the rates are going to be higher and the use is going to be higher because you have two families. So I would go with separate meters. And can we, for any new development, definitely, but going back, is that possible to already established
Mayor Bagley, Councilmember Peck, I wouldn't recommend that we simply install another meter because that meter represents a significant amount of capacity that our water system could be required to serve. So they do have the option of sub-metering. They can always buy into the system by paying another system development fee to pay for that capacity that's being installed. However, the cost of that is so high that the savings that they would get on the bill would never pay for it. So.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Finley?
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. My concern really is the rate class. It just doesn't seem fair for two families to get into that higher cost. Because there's two families, not just one family. And one family is not using that much water, two families are. So could there be a simpler way? Could we just divide the bill in half, the usage in half in the billing process?
Mayor Bagley, Councilmember Finley, the residents can choose to simply divide the bill in half.
Right, but the rate class would change if you divided the gallons of use in half. So say, you know, if you went back to the slide that had the gallons, say that so many gallons were used, so it bumped it up to the second or third highest one. If you divide that by 2, because there's 2 families, it would then lower it.
Mayor Bagley, Councilmember Finley, so currently, when you look at how much an average single-family bill is and then how much half of the duplex bill is, already, even though they're hitting that higher tier, the half of a duplex bill is already less than what a single-family home is paying generally, on average. So I'm not sure how much.
But they're paying more per gallon for water.
Correct.
They're using less, but paying more.
But they have purchased a type of capacity that's the same as the single-family home. So I think there's an equity issue if we just divide their use and say, if it goes through this meter, it's only, you know, it's tier 1, but through your meter, we're gonna give you twice as much. If we wanted to do something like that, I would really recommend that we establish a new class by itself. I'm not real comfortable with just dividing in half in the single family tier, because I think there is, you know, potentially a real difference in the cost of serving those
It just
households.
seems like it's not fair. That's the reason I wanted us to look into it. And it seems like there ought to be an easier way to fix it.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you. As usual, when you take care of something, it's extremely thorough, and it makes me cry a little because it's kind of over my over my head. Very painful to think this hard. But anyway, so in looking at this, the whole point of this was to find ways to build economically more feasible, make building housing more economically feasible. And one of those ways is to reduce some of the infrastructure costs for developers and builders. So this is very thorough, but you also give a lot of the drawbacks and how much more other things would cost. And I do think that, because I'm something of an optimist, I do think that people could get if you buy into a duplex, you know there are going to be issues with equity, perhaps. So, you know, it's not for everybody, but it is a way to save some money. And I do think that you've given a good solution here, which is to just either leave it as it is, or property owners can install their own sub-meters. So if they feel that there's an equity issue, for instance, if Mayor Bagley and his family and I chose to move into a duplex, that would be extremely unlikely, but because—
And fun, so fun. I'm in.
No, not at all. It might be fun
yeah.
with your children, but, you know, there'd be 6 of them and 1 of me, and they would use a whole lot more water. And so I would probably suggest
My
that,
kids
you know.
don't bathe. They use very little water.
But you know that before you bought into that. And you could always install those meters, and you could always take them out, correct? Mm-hmm. So that would be a way of having some control over this yourself and being able to set up some kind of, you know, reasonable way for people to get along and be sure that things are fair if you felt they weren't fair, without raising the cost of everything, because creating a new rate and fee class, as you pointed out, would be more expensive, and especially for the wastewater. And requiring separate metering would be very expensive too. And that takes away the whole point of this, which is to make it less expensive for people. So I would go for either the first one, kind of leaving it as it is, or number 3, with not requiring separate meters, but allowing people to set up sub-meters if they felt like there were problems with equity.
Councilmember Martin?
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I could have sworn there were more slides than this in the packet. There are, right? Yeah. So, because I think what's left out here is that, and you did say it, but very briefly, that if you look at what a duplex dweller pays after the bill is cut in half, it's about the same as the average single-family bill, so that even though they may have crept into a higher tier, that they're not actually paying more for their half of the bill. Is that correct?
Yes.
So that and what was not in there that I found was what the cost of installing private sub-metering facilities is. And you did say too that some of the surrounding municipalities install sub-metering or have sub-metering. Is that correct, or did I read it wrong?
Mayor Bagley, Councilmember Martin, actually, neighboring communities, in particular Boulder, requires that you buy 2 single-family meters, one for each residential unit.
Ooh, so that's
Yeah.
much more expensive.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Because where I was going was after the cost of the sub-metering mechanisms that could be installed by the duplex owners. Do you know what that is?
I don't have a lot of specific information. Harold's looking at some of them. There are some sort of digital ones that just kind of clamp onto your water lines.
Where the splitter is?
Yeah, it's a couple $100.
70. It ranges from around $75 to $200 to $300, depending on the level of accuracy and what you want in the system.
Mm-hmm.
One of the challenges with the separate meter piece. And so I had the experience in an apartment that I lived in many, many moons ago, where they put separate meters in for our units and they charged us. The plumbing becomes a significant issue in how you do that, because depending on how all that's tied into the facility, it could mean that you can or you can't do the separate meters. Councilmember Finley mentioned that to me earlier, and it brought back memories. So when they were doing that where I lived at the time, they were actually having to come in and redo some of the plumbing at the same time in order to get that to occur. So that is an unknown when you come into the sub-metering piece that will vary dependent on all of the duplexes and how you can approach that. I can say that there are some local entrepreneurs that we've met with that are working with sensors that could probably do something similar. I don't know what the cost of that would be.
Thank you.
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. Just after reviewing the options as they've been laid out and kind of the cost prohibitive issues that are correlated with each one, especially concerning the fact that as we're looking towards the way we're dealing with housing and the kind of housing that we want built, we don't want to add any more disincentive at any juncture there. So, the new rate and fee class option, really kind of bothers me in the sense of higher development fees could disincent the building of duplexes, which seems to be a product that would very easily hit some of our goals and aspirations for our housing going forward. And also noting that on average, you're seeing comparable to even maybe slightly less total water bill if split in half, that I would go more towards option 1. And I'm just wondering if the city has some sort of educational program if a resident is interested in sub-metering, or some way to find some sort of consultation thereof. Would you know if there's anybody in the city that offers that kind of educational?
Mayor Bagley,
option?
Councilmember Rodriguez, we do not currently offer that education because we believe that it's the choice of the homeowner whether they wish to do that. Oh, sorry, I'm too far away from the microphone. So we don't currently have that, but that's a good idea to roll out that kind of resident education.
That's actually a good point. After the conversation about the sub-metering piece, Dale and I actually had the opportunity to drive with each other to a meeting at Smucker's, and that was something that we actually talked about, was the creation of a educational program that also talked about some types of meters that you could put in residential units, so we could provide those to folks, to individuals that were interested in it. Depending on the situation, Councilmember Peck's comment about conflict resolution, that very well may be an issue that we bring in, and we bring neighborhood resources in to help where we have situations where individuals aren't getting along. But I think we could develop some type of informational piece with resources in terms of where they could look to install those sub-meters if their facility is conducive to it. So yes,
Okay.
we can do that.
Well, with that in mind, my preference is for option 1 of leaving it as is.
I'm just going to jump in since we've all spoken. Can't we leave it as is, but simply double, like get your little tiers? Can't we just simply double, if you're living in a duplex, can't you just double the amount of water used until you hit the next tier? And then that way everybody's treated fairly and they continue to split the bill however they're doing it?
Mayor Bagley, that would create an intra-class equity issue with single-family users in the same class. So
In what way?
Because they have all paid this same fee to come in, and we have said, your usage as a class looks like this. And so when you have 10,000 gallons that go through your meter, this is the cost of that 10,000 gallons. And if we then change the cost of 10,000 gallons for some, but not all members of that class.
But what I'm saying
that's
is
an issue.
Why I understand. But what I'm saying is right now it's inequity. What I just saw was that it's double inequity, because if you're living in a duplex and you're being treated as single family, you're double family. That's what I saw from the numbers. I'm looking at the math. Tell me how I'm wrong, Dale. Come on.
Mayor Bagley, you're not wrong. I think the issue that we've seen with the new data and using GIS is that clearly there's a difference in duplex customers versus single-family customers on internal use, which is causing them to trigger up into those higher class rates, which also does impact their sewer rate. And so, Becky's shy to say it, but the bottom line is I think the best way to deal with it is to acknowledge them as a different class of customer. There's 800 duplexes in the city. That's a large number. And in doing so, my guess is we're going to come up with a different increasing block structure that will acknowledge the differences between a duplex and a single family. We're doing that rate and fee study in 2019. I think we can come back and address the equity issue. So if we left it alone for now, as long as we're committed to doing that rate and fee study, we can return to you in 2019 with some options on how to deal with the duplex customer class.
I like that idea.
So,
does anyone oppose that idea?
So we could do both. So leave it alone, provide educational information for those that are having issues now, bring it into the rate and fee study. We'll see what we see at that point, and there may be another conversation to say, here's where we're going to end up. So I would do both. It's a derivative of what you said. Do both.
Well, because also Councilmember Martin, she's kind of the champion for xeriscaping and limited water use and making more effective use of our water and our water usage, right? What I saw here also is that, those families are using half the water in the summer, meaning they're using the same amount of water for two families. And so they're getting dinged twice, so to speak, meaning that they're using the same amount of water. Anyway, what I'm saying is that they're sharing a yard, so they're using the same amount of water as one family. So they're using the same amount of water for two homes.
Right, and they paid only one system development fee for those two
Except
homes
that,
as well.
Right, but I guess what I'm saying is that as they go along, the water use is a variable use, not a fixed use. So what I'm saying is they're charged based on how much they use every month.
Yes, but one of the largest costs of the water utility is the provision of capacity.
You know what I think we should do? We should do a rate study, and we should probably have staff go and talk about it and then bring it back for 2019.
Hey.
All right, is everybody in agreement that we do that before we, is there, right, okay. So let's go with Councilmember Peck first.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. Mine is just an education for me question. Townhouses have a shared wall, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Do they have separate meters when a townhouse is built, or are townhouses on one meter? Because I want to know what the difference would be.
Yes, so Mayor Bagley, Councilmember Peck, they have the option to install separate meters per unit or to pay as, multifamily, because they'd be over 2 units. So three plus units would be classified as multifamily. So they could choose which rate class they wanted to be in.
But even if they chose multifamily, would each townhouse, it would still be 1 meter? It would be
One
the
meter per
same issue?
building, yes. Mhm.
Yeah, we need a study.
That's a great idea, Councilmember Peck. Councilmember Martin.
Thank you. Just for the record, I think we should leave it as it is and then look at it harder in the 2019 rate study. And I hope everyone has
That's a
come
great
to that
idea,
conclusion.
Marcia.
But what I do want to just get out on the table first is why we're looking at this. Do we have a large number of complaints from people who live in duplexes because they can't figure out how to divide their water bill, or why is this an issue at this time?
Councilmember Finley.
I had a constituent call me and really was not concerned with the division of the water, but was concerned because they're paying more for that water because they get into higher tiers because it's 2 families. And he didn't think that was fair, and I agreed with him.
All right, so I think you've got consensus to come back in 2019. Yay. All right. That can just got kicked. Thanks. All right, let's go ahead and move on to enclave annexations. So you're now the annexation ninja? There's something?
Thank you, Mayor, council members. Brian Schumacher with Planning Development Services. So this evening, we're bringing forward to you a discussion item. We're requesting direction from council on whether or not council is interested in considering city-initiated annexation of unincorporated enclave parcels that are eligible for annexation under state statutes, that being that they've been completely surrounded by the city limits for at least a 3-year period. As noted in the communication and as shown on the map, there are 27 total enclaves, and they comprise a total of about 600 acres. Some of the enclaves comprise single parcels, while others comprise multiple parcels and multiple ownerships. Some of the enclaves have existed for a long time. I think I noted in the communication that there was an enclave that was considered in 1990 that wasn't annexed at that time because of concerns by the neighbors in the subdivision. Other enclaves have become surrounded by the city, obviously more recently, and some are will become eligible as an enclave, I believe, starting next month. Just wanted to note that a couple of these you have seen fairly recently through the annexation referral process, and those are near the intersection of Sunset and Boston, one being the northeast corner of Sunset and Boston, and one being on the west side of Sunset and north of Boston Avenue, and they were both came through the annexation referral process by the same property owner. and they are looking at mixed-use development on those parcels. Did talk with the applicant because they saw the article in the newspaper or asking about the enclave annexation process, and they are still planning to proceed with their annexation proposal as they had submitted through the referral process previously with City Council. And if you have questions about that, I can answer those as well. Also wanted to mention there was another annexation referral on a parcel that comprises the area, I believe it's shown on the map as enclave number 6 near Spruce Avenue and Francis Street. It's about a 5-acre enclave. At the time in 2006, one of the property owners had come forward to request annexation. At that time, it was not an enclave, and they did not pursue annexation at that time just because of some of the costs associated with annexation. So obviously the map that's in your packet includes what we would consider the targeted zoning for the parcel if it were to be brought into the city, either residential, mixed use, or non-residential uses. And if you have questions about any of those, I'm happy to respond to those. If council is interested in considering annexation of any of the parcels, staff would then proceed with conducting some additional research. Obviously, we wanted to bring this forward to you on a preliminary basis, but we would want to conduct some additional research regarding either non-conforming or illegal uses on some of the parcels and have a inventory of that information. I would also want to look at what our current infrastructure and service territories are, who's providing services to each of these parcels. We'd want to follow up with the property owners and contact them to get their feedback on potential annexation of their properties. We heard from Mr. Willis earlier this evening. We again want to check in with council before we move forward with hiring a surveyor to do putting together the legal descriptions and the annexation maps. Some hard costs that we would have to incur if council is interested in annexing these. And then obviously we'd hire a surveyor, put together the legal descriptions and annexation maps, and then bring those back for council's consideration as part of a annexation ordinance for enclave. As I mentioned in the communication, there are some of the steps that normally we go through with respect to annexation that are property owner initiated are not required as part of an enclave process. And so just wanted to let you know about that in advance. And if you have any specific questions, I'd be happy to respond. Just to give you a little bit of information in terms of what planning currently has in terms of budgeting, are budgeted for this type of endeavor. I think right now we have enough money in the 2018 budget to work on about 6 to 8 of the enclaves, and in 2019 we consider additional 6 to 8 enclaves if council is so inclined to consider any or all of the enclaves.
So I've just got a question before I start taking the cue. If we were to force annex people into the city, would they still have to provide their historical water or provide the 3 acre-feet per acre of land?
So Mayor, typically what's happened and what we've done in the past with respect to water policy is that if a property is brought in as an enclave, that upon development or subdivision of the property, then they need to meet that raw water requirement.
So there would not be any financial impact through that aspect, at least,
with the initial
until
enclave
they plat
annexation.
it.
And
Okay.
that's typically how we've handled it. Right.
Okay, all right. All right, Councilmember Finley.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. First of all, I would never be in favor of force annexing anybody. I do think that this is a cheaper way if some landowner wanted to annex into the city, that if they were in an enclave, it'd be a cheaper way for them to do it, wouldn't it?
Certainly.
Yeah, and a much less cumbersome process.
It certainly can be that way, yes.
So I would be in favor of asking all the landowners on our map here if they're interested in being annexed, by this method, and if they are, then we would pursue it, and if they're not, then we wouldn't. That would be my suggestion.
Councilmember Peck.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. What has made the city want to do this?
That was actually a question from council that you all wanted us to bring forward to look at. And specifically, I think it was related to some of the marijuana shops that were opening in the enclaves.
Okay.
And that's the genesis of the request in this council item.
Okay. And I agree with Councilwoman Finley, except for number 11, which is the dispensary at the corner of 119 in Maine, the new one. I would force annex that one, basically because it is in the heart of our city. And I still think we should ask the owners, but I would have no objection to force annexing that one.
Mayor Pro Tem?
I agree with Councilwoman Finley. I'm very much against forced annexing. People buy something under certain conditions, and they have a right to their property staying under as much of that. If they want to join, if they want to be annexed, that's fine. But if they don't want to be annexed, and it doesn't appear that some people have even been asked, I absolutely don't approve of us forcing them to annex. There are a couple of things, with the exception of number 11, which they went out of their way after we had talked extensively about the retail marijuana to open a county enclave in the middle of this town, which completely undermined everything that we had discussed. Okay, so other things are number 3 through 5. This is something that Mr. Bo Schaefer owns, and I know that there is an ongoing problem with the fact that he believes in the annexation that the city did to the south with Rogers Grove, that they erroneously, in that transfer from Boulder County to city, that they erroneously took a chunk out of his property. So I would like to see, and so we have, Longmont has one version of the title, Boulder County has another version of the title. So we really need to straighten that out before we even think about annexing that. The property 6 at Spruce and Francis, that's my neighborhood. It's the last little dirt road left. It's like a little paradise. People have chickens and geese and, you know, I don't want that to be paved over and subject to city rules when they're perfectly happy. So if somebody there wants it to be annexed, that's fine, but I don't think we should force annex any of that because people purposely live there so they can have more relaxed county rules. Mr. Willis, do I have your name? Does not seem to want to be annexed. I don't really want to annex any farmland, any more farmland than we've already done, because we keep taking county agricultural land and rezoning it eventually as residential. And I think that's a terrible idea. The 7 through 9 at Boston and Sunset, I don't know whether they want to there are 3 parcels there apparently, but that is something that I think we should try to urge them to do, because it does have to do with our flood mitigation and riparian setbacks and so many things. The rest of this appears to be, well, the number 26, which we own, which is out by Union, that's fine. I think we all would like to annex that. But all the other things appear to have livestock on them, and, you know, so it's agricultural land. If they don't want to annex it, I I don't want to force them to be annexed, particularly without notice.
Councilmember Martin?
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I am seeing some areas on the map that are not called out. They're in white as opposed to the beige of inside Longmont that look like enclaves in the sense that they are surrounded by the city on every side. What are those and why are they not on the list?
Mayor Bagley, Councilmember Martin. So those will be eligible at some point to be annexed as an enclave, but they have not met the 3-year threshold.
Can you explain again the 3-year threshold?
So in order for the city to initiate annexation of an enclave parcel or area, the parcel that's considered an enclave needs to be completely surrounded by the city limits for a period of at least 3 years. So some of those parcels that are shown as surrounded in white have not yet been completely surrounded for that 3-year period. So they are not eligible for, by state law, for city-initiated annexation.
I understand. Just as a comment, I'd like to say that while I agree with the general consensus that forced annexation is probably not who we are, it seems unreasonable to me to make a forced annexation of one property that, while we may not like what it's doing there, I can see if it were causing a tremendous hardship, if it were stinking, if it were, hazardous in some way, but it's not. And so I would be against singling out one property for forced annexation without making it a more general operation.
Councilmember Rodriguez?
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. Are any of the enclaves currently serviced completely by Longmont utilities?
Mayor Bagley, Councilmember Rodriguez, yes, we'll have to do a little bit more research, but some of them are serviced by city utilities.
Okay, thank you. And I'm just wondering if there is a legal implication at all, any negative legal implication to specifically singling out one property for annexation?
Mayor Bagley, Councilmember Rodriguez, not necessarily just based on the hypothetical as you presented it in that form, but if you're talking about the marijuana location, there might be implications for that depending on how we were to regulate that location when we brought it in.
Okay, thank you. So just to chime in, I'm for a very robust outreach to the enclaves, if you will, to really try to sell it as a good thing if we can find issues where, for certain properties it seems like there would not be a net benefit, but I think there are properties where it would be a benefit, and that we probably could bring along some of these enclaves in that fashion versus just doing an outright forced annexation. And that's where I say, I'm not necessarily for singling out one specific property in this circumstance. Thanks.
All right, there's nobody else in the queue. I guess so first and foremost, this is a prime example of where ideologically speaking, I come down on the side of, oh my gosh, we never impose on property rights, and oh my gosh, we would never force anybody to do anything with their property that they don't want to. In general, that is where I fall ideologically. However, pragmatically, right, there are other issues. So, for example, this is not we're not like expanding. It's not like we're conquering. We're not like a city, expanding throughout northern Colorado in a quest for total world domination and building an empire, as much as some of us would like, apparently. No, just kidding. No, but they're enclaves. They are properties that are surrounded by the city. So, number one, they get a benefit from the city. They're basically in our city, getting the benefit of our utilities, of our roads. They are part of our community. But the question is, are they paying their fair share? They don't, for example, property taxes, rules. If they wanted to start, if it's an agricultural property, they could start a pig farm. They could, I don't know, they could do all kinds of things because the city does not control and does not dictate what goes there. This is not something new. It's something that the state of Colorado says that we can do so long it's that they're surrounded by the city, and they've been that way for 3 years. They recognize that the city, we have not just the legal authority, but there's some reasons there. I used to back up to one of these properties when I lived in the old house when I was first elected to Ward 1. And there was a crime, a couple crimes that were committed. I remember that somebody decided to target shoot on the land between Highway 66 and Alpine. On one hand, it's like your God-given right to go out and target shoot. But at the same time, the backdrop was a bunch of single-family homes. And I remember spending the night in my basement because the cops were trying to figure out, well, who's the jurisdiction? Well, you can't call it. Well, we can't go. It's got to be the county. Well, the county can't make it in time. I'm sorry. There's all kinds of messes that occur when we've got land in the middle of our town that is controlled by 3 commissioners that office 30 minutes away. And so, there's fairness, there's safety, there's value. And even though I don't want to force annex anyone in, and I also think that someone who's agriculture on the east of town, I look at as very different than residential properties that we surround. And so it's not as clear cut as just ideologically saying, I don't want to tell people what to do with their property. It's not like with a federal or state government, with a local government trying to take 100,000 people and have everybody live good lives. And that doesn't mean that if we annex you in, you have to get necessarily rid of you don't have to do anything with the land, right? It just means that you're subject to, the rest of the laws that your neighbors abide by. And so I personally wouldn't have a problem with it. I can see, I don't care if Mr. Tebow were to call and say, I don't want to come in. I'd say, well, you're surrounded by the city, you're in the city, you get the benefit. Or if the residence is up in Area 1, but we don't want to come in. Well, of course you don't. You're getting all the benefits, but you're not paying like the rest of us. I can understand why people wouldn't want to do this, but fairness, safety, sanity, and just good community planning says that, we've grown. You're part of the community. You can't keep living in the garage. We've got to develop it into something that we can all live with. So I'm actually for the proposal of going out and asking and putting the hard sell on it, making it easier, pitching it, etc. I don't think we should I think it's all or nothing. I don't think we can. I don't care. I don't believe it's either one or the other. Ideologically, we have to say we're not going to do it at all, because there's lots of things other than the pot shop that I could argue that no, we don't like that. We either have to be heavy-handed to everybody or heavy-handed to no one. That's what I say. So I say hard sell, see how many people respond, see what's left over, and then go from there. Councilmember Martin?
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. How many of these parcels get city utilities, and is there a cost differential? How do we make that equitable, given that they're not paying city property taxes?
Mayor and Councilmember Martin, we'll have to do a little bit more research on each of the individual parcels, because some of the enclaves have multiple parcels and multiple ownerships. But we can provide that information back to council.
Generally, Dale, and if I'm wrong, come up and smack me. If you're not inside the city limits, you pay 50% more for the utilities. Is that correct, Dale? Only on water. When you get to the public safety pieces, it's different, because Joni and I were just talking about this. The jurisdictional issues are real. We've had that in certain enclaves, and we had a death actually on one of the streets, and we started investigating it, but it was actually under the jurisdiction of the county, and so then the county had to come in. In terms of fire protection, they're part of the fire protection districts, but we have interoperational agreements with those fire protections. with those districts, and so sometimes we come in and actually provide that service based on the interoperational agreements with them.
Could we do that, where if they don't come in, that's fine, we just don't show up and put out the fire when it catches? Are we allowed to do that? I'm kidding, that's a joke. As Dale's like, no, let her burn, no. All right, any other questions? Councilmember Peck?
Thank you. Ken, when you bring this back, can you bring us back a key for the county zoning codes as well?
Sure.
I'd be curious as to what they are zoned.
Although
Yeah.
you need, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, in the table that's in your packet, there is a column for county zoning, but we can provide some color-coded on the map, too, if you.
Well, I don't know what they stand for, though. I just want a key to know what.
Sure.
they-
You
Okay,
bet.
thanks.
So one of the things when you talk about the hard sell that we will look at too, is so when you look at our ISO rating, I believe we're a 2 now. A 2 for fire. And so if you're technically in an enclave and you're part of some of the other fire protection districts, if it's a higher rating, actually there is a homeowners or business owners insurance reduction based on that ISO rating. So we will pull all of that information together to show to folks to say, here's actually the benefits.
And I'd
at
like
the same time.
Could you also have, if someone does not want to come in, I guess the question becomes, could you ask them why not? I'd like to know why not.
Yes.
And then, by the way, that joke fell flat. I'm not saying we burned down any houses, in case the paper, like Mayor Bagley says, that was a joke. No one laughed, but it was a joke. All right, then you need direction, right? And so
I think the direction from council
got
is
it?
to go out and engage and talk about the benefits of coming into the city, come back and make a report to council based on what we've seen, and in addition to just who's willing and who's not willing, to also ask why, so we can provide you with that information.
all right, yep, that's my understanding. Councilmember Martin?
One more quick question. If the property is currently being used in a way that would be non-compliant, what happens?
Typically, legal nonconforming uses continue. I mean, we had that for a long period of time when properties up by 17th and Francis were annexed as enclaves back in 1990. There were some agricultural uses there. There continue to be agricultural uses on some of the parcels. And those legal nonconforming uses can continue. It's the illegal uses that we need to address. And there are a couple instances where we probably have to address that prior to annexation, preferably.
All right, anything else on that issue? All right, great. We're just rolling along tonight. Well, let's move on to mayor and council comments. We got nothing? All right, I guess I'd like to respond. I guess nobody else has anything? Nothing. Okay, all right. So, I guess I want to address a couple of things. I'm going to start with Mr. Thompson. He asked me to respond. I will vote, so in case, just so everybody knows, council, whoever's watching, we belong to the Platte River Power Authority. The Platte River Power Authority is basically a power company made up of Fort Collins, Loveland, Estes Park, and Longmont. There's an organizing document, I forget what it's called, but it's basically a charter. They don't call it a charter, but it's an organic contract. Thank you. And so the organic contract basically states that each city will have 2 members on the board. And that is it's the mayor or someone the mayor appoints. And so I sit on that board. And then the other one is the head of our power utility or someone capable of running the power utility. And so those 8 people come together and we meet once a month, and staff, just much like a city council meeting, the staff up there, Jason Frisbee's, I don't know if he's an executive director, general manager, but he's the boss of the staff, much like Harold Dominguez is the staff here. And then staff does the job, and then the board sets policy. So there's several votes coming up, as just like with council. One of the votes is going to be on whether or not we, as a power utility, are going to adopt a goal for 100% carbon-free by 2030. I'm going to vote yes on that. assuming that it doesn't change. That is my vote, and my vote only, meaning you guys could yell at me and say, don't vote that way. You guys could pass a resolution that says the mayor shall use his vote to vote against it. The citizens could line up, and 99,999 residents, basically everybody but me, could say, Mayor Bagley, you will not vote that way. There is nothing in the charter, constitution, or otherwise, other than recalling me, to basically tell me how I can vote on that board. Not only is it unlawful, illegal, and unconstitutional, I have a fiduciary responsibility to the board to not act just in my best interest or the city's best interest. I am acting as a board member, and I need to act in the best interest of the power group. And so, at the risk of personal liability, I believe. And so, I believe that goal is in the best interest for our city and our region and the group. However, it's not quite as simple as saying, are you not using all the funds necessary to figure out a way to go towards renewable energy? There's a real problem with renewable energy, and that is that if you have all this wind and all this solar coming in, and you don't have the outlet for it, meaning if people aren't using the energy, it blows up, to put it in layman's terms. You need to have a balanced system, so to speak. In an ideal world, Jason Frisbee speaks and tells us, ideally we would always know exactly how much power we need, and it would never change, both day and night. It would just be constant. That is the cheap way to run our power utility. But it doesn't. It goes up and down, depending on the season, time of day, etc. And so if we had 100% renewable energy right now, it would not work, because if the wind and the sun were going full bore, we do not have a place to unload the energy. We need to have a network, a partnership. At the time, it was going to be the Southwest Power Pool, and the Southwest Power Pool was working until Excel bailed. And when Excel bailed, that went the big dog, at which point it all started falling apart, and Jason Frisbee and his staff started looking for alternatives about, well, what transmission partners can we get so that when we have too much energy, we can put it onto the grid for other people to use. The other problem is the sun is not always shining and the wind is not always blowing. And the technology for lithium batteries, not to mention the ethical components of forcing small children to mine lithium, is currently not there. And we don't know how fast it's going to happen or how fast battery storage is going to come along. We don't know what's going to happen with the transmission partnership, although we had an executive session to discuss legal options about finding another alternative. So if there's any implication that I don't know what I'm talking about or I'm not behind 100% renewable energy by 2030, I would challenge that assertion. So number one, I'm for renewable energy by 2030. I think it's possible. We just need to keep looking and fighting and pushing forward. The second vote that's coming up is on Windy Gap. Windy Gap, my understanding is we can buy Colorado Big Thompson water. It's going to cost about $40,000 per acre foot, but unlike other water, my understanding is that it's not one-time use. We don't get to use it and then just send it down the river. We get to use it again and again and again and again and again. We can use it and then pump it back again and again and again and again. Other water rights we have, we can't do that. The Windy Gap storage unit is extremely valuable as far as water use goes for that reason and other reasons. And so I need to see what happens with cost. I need to see how the project comes along. But if it continues on the trajectory that, and the only snag is people are now saying that, there's a lawsuit. It's going to be delayed. Now, what's that going to do to costs? I don't know. So we'll have to see. But in general, in theory, I still think Windy Gap's a good idea. But, of course, we'll have to just kind of see how that goes as costs increase and timelines change. So I don't know on that vote, but I think I will. But I withhold judgment until I see the final information. And then last, I'd like to speak to my good friends who are pro 2A. Michael Baca, thank you for your comments. Thank you. Oftentimes I have the following thought, and I've said this lately. We don't live, this group in particular, I hear it often stated, we don't live in a democracy. We live in a republic. People are fond of saying that. And I always ask, what's the definition of a republic? A republic means that we don't vote on everything, right? A republic means that we vote for our elected representatives. And then we let those elected representatives basically do the work and make the decision. That's what the republic means. The republic representation that you have, like it or not, is this council. We are the example of the democratic republic which was founded in our great nation. We vote for each of us. We do a good job, we get reelected. If we don't, we're out, right? So part of that, speaking just for this chair as mayor, right? I've tried to interact with various members of your group and members of the public, both Moms Demand Action and Rally for Our Rights, and both in written and verbal format, but I just want to be clear. I'm a big believer and proponent of the Second Amendment, without a doubt. But I have never, okay, speaking as a second Brian, okay, now granted, it's tough to do when I'm the mayor, right? But I've got this little thing here that says, be fair, be humble, be kind, have fun, right? I always try to think of that. So please don't take my comments as heavy-handed, okay? Because I'm the mayor, it could come across as very heavy-handed, right? But when I remember my first day on council, and I know I'm taking a long time, I'm sorry, guys, but on my first day on council, I remember it was the frackers. They're the anti-fractivists. Bonnie was here, and Katie Witt was here, and Dennis Coombs was here, and I lost it. Do you remember? I looked at my fellow council. I'm like, is this what being on council's like? 3 hours of public invited to be heard over something we can't do? You know, are you kidding me? You know, go to the end. And everyone's like, no, 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 no. Just shut up and listen. From that day, I have shut up and I've listened. Right? That's my job. People are angry. I might disagree, but I listen respectfully. Now, when the anti-fractivists came, they wanted us to do something. They were saying, you need to pass a ban. You need to take action to tighten down on your regulations. Please take action. And it was a big fight of 7 years, and we had to take action, and there were meetings and protests, and in the end, we took action. For the last year and a half, I have many friends who are strong proponents of the Second Amendment movement. We had a gentleman come in who was a friend of mine, go to church with him. He would come in with a rifle stock. It wasn't even a full rifle, and that would make people nervous. And again, it wasn't a gun. It wasn't a weapon. Why would you get nervous? I get that. But I also get why some people would get nervous, because it's not normal, right, to come into city council with a gun prop. And he did that once, and I pulled him aside, and I said, what are you doing, man? As a lover and proponent of the Second Amendment, why in the world are you stirring the pot? I have never seen a group work so hard to do something that I'm fighting not to have happen. I mean, I don't know what you want me to do, but right now you have a council that they're not, the only time we take action is when your group talk about taking action is when your group brings it up. My definition of protecting the Second Amendment is to keep this out of the hands of government. I am trying as hard as I can. But Rally for Our Rights is doing everything possible to have a debate over this issue. Do you want to have a debate? We can, but what's going to happen is, I guarantee you, this council, if you put a gun to their head and you said, pick one, we're going to make it stricter or we're going to loosen the Second Amendment rules in our city. If you forced them to, I guarantee you that the 38% in this town that vote Democrat would probably slide to the left. I'm not sure. And the 31% that vote Republican would probably slide to the right. And you would be left in the Boulder situation. But right now, there's nothing going on. Nothing. And so my solution is keep council together. What that means is, guys, how many people here want to talk about guns? How many people here want to pass any type of legislation whatsoever to limit or move any type of gun legislation? Now, if I take action on what Rally for Our Rights is requesting of me, that would move us from the status quo, which would take away my rights. I don't want to do that. So I respect what you said, Mr. Baca. I do. I get it. I'm with you, right? As I'm listening, I'm like, oh, God, the irony, right? But if I take action You know, a simple proclamation. If I would have issued and signed that proclamation, all we would have had is a proclamation, one guy's opinion on what I learned, for example, in my hunter safety class, which was the 4 tenets of individual handling, you know, and this is the mayor's belief. It's not a proclamation, but I'm speaking. So this is kind of a proclamation, right? I proclaimed that I learned when I was in hunter safety that the 4 tenets of handling a firearm is always treat the gun like it's loaded, keep the muzzle pointed in a safe direction at all times, never put your finger on the trigger until you're ready to fire, point at a target and make sure your target is clear and beyond. Be safe, be responsible, love your gut, sign the mayor. I could have said that. I just said it. We all happy now? But but by not saying it, I want the gun debate to die because there's no debate. And so I respect everything Mothers Demand Action says and believes. I respect everything that the Rally for Our Rights people believe. But at the end of the day, as chairman of this council, as the referee of this council, I do not want to have that discussion because there's nothing to discuss. So that's how I feel about that. So anyway, and I guess in the words of the Native Americans, my friends, and that's all I have to say about that. Yeah. All right. So, Councilman Martin. Aho.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. A couple of things I would like to say. First, about the Windy Gap. I'm myself very happy that we have a couple of years to decide whether there's any necessary action on Longmont's part to be taken about Windy Gap, because I don't think we have enough information yet. And I think I would like to say, and Mayor Bagley, please correct me if I'm wrong, but PRPA using those storage rights for Chimney Hollow in the coal generation process in no way obliges PRPA to continue coal generation past the time that it needs to. So water is a pretty useful thing around this part of the world, and if there's another use for that water once they shut down that coal plant, then more power to them. It's not like they're going to be stuck with it. It's not like they can't monetize it. So I just want to point out that argument that investing in Windy Gap somehow ties us to thermal generation is not really valid. That water is an asset for PRPA, whether they need it for coal generation or not. And I suspect that they can use it to lower our rates. The other thing is, I don't want to talk about firearms either. I think it's dumb to talk about firearms. There's not going to be a consensus. What I would like is for people to be more careful. But I think given that we've talked today about conflict resolution and especially about respect, that what we need to do is think really hard about what respect means. Second Amendment people often talk about you need to be firearm owners so that if the government overreaches its mandated power, you have an alternative. I'm skeptical about that, but that's not what we need to talk about. What we need to talk about is the appropriateness of abuse of power and respect. And I think that when a group of very, very, very peaceful people has assembled and has done so traditionally, has done so for more than 20 months in this particular run of assembly by essentially the same group of people, that it's an abuse of power for another group to congregate, as is their right, in the same place, at the same time, deliberately, as the peaceful group of people, and to do so bearing arms, knowing that to do so creates terror, discomfort, maybe anger, but I didn't see any. I saw a lot of fear, and I saw a lot of grief among the people who congregate for peace. And I saw a lot of disrespect, dressing like the mayor, dressing like the mayor pro tem, and really carelessly handling those weapons. We didn't know if they were loaded or not, but we know that their barrels were pointing at people because they were slung very carelessly over a couple of shoulders. And we had a member of the Longmont Police Force point that out. So I think that's disrespectful, and I think it's an abuse of power because, as has been pointed out many more times than really needed, a person who is armed is more powerful than a person who is not armed. And I don't like to see that abuse of power in this city, and it makes me really sad. So I hope that everyone who is fearful that there's a congregation of people who wants to curtail their Second Amendment rights should think about it again, because I have never before in my life wanted to curtail anybody's rights. But I will tell you that last Saturday, I wanted to curtail yours for the first time because you were disrespecting two friends of mine who sit here next to me, and you were disrespecting a group of peaceful people who want the city to be a safe and loving place. So I really hope I don't see that again.
And just by way of friendly, just not, you guys, there's people here that belong to the group, right? But in this day and age, right, it's not like that. This is a council of your neighbors. And so, I mean, we know where people live, even though they say they live in Longmont. We belong to the same Facebook groups. We see the pictures. I saw the words, how they describe Mayor Pro Tem in the 4-letter asterisks. I find it disgusting. And that this same group, you know, I feel the same way. I'm angry. You call my friends 4-letter words that begin with F, C, S, D, whatever. I mean, we all do business together in this town. If you guys think that I'm going to like ever do business with anybody personally, when you're treating me like that, it's like, that's not politics. That's just being a jerk. And it's your right to be a jerk. It's America. Hell, I've adopted that before, you know, God-given right to be a jerk, but there's consequences to being a jerk, and that affects business. It affects, I mean, this is a volunteer time. How much do you earn a month, Councilmember Peck, to be on city council? $1,000 a month. If you've got 50 developers come to me, and these developers all want, you know, my time, and I don't see my kids. I give everybody my time. If somebody's a jerk to me, calls me a bro, you know, you're half mayor, half bro, you're not bro enough, and by the way, you work with a C word, and F you. I'm seeing that online on social media. Nobody's getting a meeting. Not because I'm the mayor and I'm being a jerk and abusing my power. It's just I've got to choose. And so, anyway, just something to keep in mind. Block me from social media because I see everything. Not to mention the clients. My clients belong to your group. And they keep me up to date on what goes on. And I'm ticked. I'm offended for my friends and myself. So I just want to be clear that we're all neighbors, man. That's not politics. That's just people. So, city manager, anything else?
No comments, Mayor, Council.
Mr. Kramer, anything else?
No comment, Mayor.
All right, great. Let's go home.